Hey, Gavin.
Hi, Louie.
How's it going? You are still up tucked away in these woods.
In the pines, the sweet
Into
little
the woods
pines.
you went?
Yes. You know, what's funny is for the last couple days, it's been like, oh, it's September. Well, it's fall. Here's some leaves. Here's some pumpkins. And today it's like, it's 89 degrees.
Blazing.
I hope you love it.
I will say your hair swoopy is the longest and swoopiest it has ever been.
It's so,
ever been.
It's so much. I hate it. But also, we're in a pandemic, so...
You could be working at a Hot Topic as an assistant manager. Put a streak in that hair, hun.
Get me a lip ring.
Oh, you would be leading the Black Parade. and you know what? I'd follow, okay?
So glad that you came into the city with your dad for that. Is
stupid.
Is he your dad? Is he your daddy?
Oh my godness. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome to the Mixed Reviews. We are a film podcast in which we take a film subject such as an actor, director, or a mini genre, and we take 2 weeks, or in this case, 3 weeks, and we watch as many movies as we can, and we report back to you what's good and what's not.
The reviews are mixed. We did take a little extra time for this episode, though, but I think, one, we deserved it, because it is summertime, the end of the summer. It is the dog days, and they are over. Thank you.
Also, it's a pandemic. No one's employed. I actually got a job for like a week.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I worked incredibly hard, as I am wont to do, but that also meant no movies.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, of course. And also, I mean... as everyone will know soon enough, this episode was just really a lot to get through.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm glad to spend more time with this subject.
Before we get into our old business, I do just want to take a moment, and I don't want to extend the episode too much, but there's some real world stuff going on, and I think, it's always good to acknowledge it. As I mentioned several times already, we're still in a pandemic, so please wear a fucking mask and wash your hands and be extra conscious about where you're going and who you're around, social distance, yada, yada, yada. Please stay safe. The other thing is, and we've talked about this on the show, but we are not immune to the real world happenings. Police continue to kill black people. Since our last episode, there have been incidents in Wisconsin, in Rochester, New York. People are protesting. Our hearts go out to the protesters, and please support them any way that you can. Obviously, if you can't go out and protest, if there's any way that you can donate, please do so, because we live in a world where people should be treated as people and not have to worry about being shot on the streets by anyone.
Absolutely.
But cops especially. So
yeah, especially cops. Also, this is a little bit old now, but from our last episode, we lost Chadwick Boseman.
Yes.
Which was, I remember when I was sitting with Derek watching TV and I got the news alert and my whole body started shaking. I had like a very visceral reaction. I think sometimes when news happens that is just so shocking and so... obviously when any life is cut short, it's, fucking awful. But I guess, we had just seen him in 2 of our episodes when we were celebrating Black Hollywood. We saw him in Da 5 Bloods in our Spike episode. And then also in our first episode, Angela Bassett. And talking about, Black Panther and just its legacy. And that was just some really fucking awful, shitty news. And I don't want to contribute to like any more takes except to say that it's sad. And he clearly was, a great artist. And it sucks that he is no longer with us.
Absolutely. And genuinely just a huge loss, not only for, a life and talent cut short, but for everybody who knew him and for everything that he was going to do. So
right, totally. Gavin, you sent me, we have a new review.
We do have a new review.
Which I think is like a fun and perfect way to get into this current episode. I wonder, should we do the poll first or should we do the review?
Let's do the poll first and then we'll read you our review. But now there's like suspense built to the review, so
yes, correct.
Yeah. It's shocking.
Gavin,
It's shocking.
Did you just hear my gasp? Okay, here we go. Our last episode, we talked about Kevin Bacon, which literally Footloose haunted me. All these past 3 weeks going to the grocery store, Footloose is playing. You know, people are singing along to Footloose at the grocery store.
Everyone was wearing leg warmers. It was crazy.
Yes. Everyone was getting Footloose. So we asked you guys to vote for what your favorite Kevin Bacon movie. My pick, Pirates, came in at 3%. That was my vote. Thank you so much to me for voting for my favorite Kevin Bacon movie. Try and find Pirates. It's fun. It's spelled like pyrotechnic.
Yeah, not Pyrates. I got that spelling bee point.
You sure did. Ding, ding, ding. Other came in at 19%. So we had someone write in. Nick B said he loves The River Wild. Eddie and others talked about their love for Hollow Man. My friend Marielle said that she Live, Laugh, Loves Tremors, which I thoroughly endorse. And then in a fucking tie, Gavin, we got Footloose and your pick, Stir of Echoes, at 39%. Also, want you to know that my friend Jimmy texted me. He said, you know what? I agree with Gavin. Stir of Echoes is great and you need to watch it. And I said, wow, I cannot believe you have fucking betrayed me.
You know what, too? Sunday I was rather busy and I was like, I know this is the last day of the poll, but I'm gonna wait as long as I can to vote. And like 7 p.m. I opened Twitter and it was like, you ran a poll. And I was like, I didn't vote. And by the way, yeah. And so it could have won. And then it didn't. And it's my fault. So I want this all to be a lesson to you all in November. Fucking vote.
Come vote, bitches.
Because if you
request your ballot now.
Footloose
Turn it in now.
Footloose could tie with Stir of Echoes.
It's the same thing, Gavin. That's the same thing.
It's the same thing. It's the same. I apologize. I'm sorry.
But thank you, everyone, for voting. And not you, Gavin, because you didn't.
No, I didn't. My civic duty just flushed down the drain. I'm the worst.
But enough with last week's episode. To get into this week's episode, we're going to read you this review that was left to us like a week ago.
Yeah.
And it says, found this podcast last year by way of this had Oscar buzz via Vanity Fair's Little Gold Men. Gavin and Louie know their stuff, put in the work, don't shy away from strong opinions, and always make me laugh. I love hanging out with these two guys who are at heart huge film fans, ready to big up people's work on screen and their charity work off screen. The Joan Crawford episode was a favorite of mine. And this is from Susan out in Dublin, Ireland.
Yes.
Okay.
But before you even say that, I just want to real quick say, I noticed like a couple weeks ago, a huge uptick in our Irish listenership. And I was like, this is her. Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Susan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Susan.
And the verbiage, ready to big up people's work. I love that.
Love it.
We love big upping people's work.
Verb and noun, baby. Love it.
And yes, we love Joan Crawford's episode also. That was our first episode we did that was like old Hollywood, classic icon. And similarly to this episode, we had to put in a lot of work to really we even talked about it for this episode. You know, I had not seen any of this person's movies, but it's just always so fun to really dive into this like great big body of work. All that to say, Gavin, who are we talking about today?
Why, we are talking about the classic, the lovely, the 2-time Oscar winner, Olivia de Havilland.
Olivia de Havilland.
First of all, that name.
God.
What a bitch.
They just don't make Hollywood stars with names like that anymore, right? Like,
sorry, Susan Sarandon.
Like, even I was thinking of like, you know, because I think, and we'll talk about it, you know, Olivia de Havilland for a lot of her career was playing just like rom-com-y type ingenue roles, and then found her way into serious type things that were so fucking good. And I was trying to think of like someone similar currently, and I was like, you know, Reese Witherspoon, you know, to me is like the most, and I'm not comparing them as like they're the same level of actors, but like Reese for sure got her start out doing comedy kind of, rom-com type stuff. But then, she's been making her own shit and doing Wild. And I was like, is that kind of, but all that to say, Olivia de Havilland has like this, I don't know, this mystique, this air, this notoriety. And I
think there's probably, because of a name like that and because of, you think classic Hollywood, you think prestige, I think people probably put her into sort of a like stodgy box, like oh, she's like upper crust. And I think the opportunity for our listeners here is, if they go back and they watch her movies, you find she is so much more than that. And it's funny because when we did Joan Crawford, we really talked about how one of the things that Joan, because I knew her, so I can call her Joan, of course, right. Best friends. She was constantly unsure of herself and constantly in the box of like, I have to do this because I have to be good enough, and I don't think Olivia de Havilland ever had those doubts.
Right.
It seemed like from the get, she was confident and strong, and she knew what she wanted, and she was willing to do whatever she had to get it, but also constantly asserting that like she is the boss.
Right. And it's also funny though, because I think both her and Joan, and I think a lot of stars at that time though, had so much reverence for Hollywood and the magic of it all. And it might have just been because it was so much harder to make movies then. There were fewer stars, but you can tell she took it very seriously.
Yeah.
She was definitely confident and knew what she wanted and was going to go get it. Unlike Joan, who was always seeking and wanting more and wanting respect
and wanting that approval. And I feel
right.
like it's funny, very early on in her career, we're going to get to this in the rewind, but very early on in her career, after doing the screen test for Captain Blood with Errol Flynn, her and him had a private conversation in which he asked her what she wanted.
And I said, I would like respect for difficult work well done. And then I said, well, what do you want out of life? And he said, I want success.
And she did say, isn't it lovely that we both got what we wanted? But like the fact that she had such foresight to be like, I want to do a good fucking job, and I want people to know me for that. Yeah. And I think that's what sort of separates her from a lot of actors of that era. A lot of them really wanted to be famous, and she's like, I want fame if I fucking deserve it.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know much about her. I knew that she was a Hollywood icon. I knew that she was one of the last living legends. She just died in June.
At the age of 104.
Yeah, casual.
So she was also going to be like, I am successful.
Yeah.
I'm winning the age contest.
She said, Ryan Murphy, you motherfucker, I know you're out there and you're going down.
I'm holding on through sheer spite.
Yeah. But I had not seen any of her movies. I watched, 15-ish.
And she had a long career. She was in about 40 films over the course of close to 50 years. So like, yeah.
Yeah. And we're going to ride the wave of a very crazy career where she, fucking laid it down.
Yeah.
So Gavin, why don't we get into a rewind?
Absolutely. Dame Olivia Mary de Havilland was born on July 1st, 1916, and she lived until she passed in July 26th of this year. Her mother, Lillian Fontaine, whose maiden name was Roos, which I love, she was a stage actress. And her father, Walter de Havilland, was an English professor at the Imperial University in Tokyo City, and he eventually became a patent attorney. Her mother, Lillian, and her father, Walter, met in Japan in 1913 and married after a year. Walter cheated a lot Not the really happiest of marriages. But Olivia de Havilland was born in Tokyo. They moved to a large house in Tokyo City, and Lillian would often give informal singing recitals.
Wow.
Yeah. Her sister Joan de Bouvier de Havilland, by the way, is Joan's full name, who would later be known as the Joan Fontaine, the actress. You would recognize her from Hitchcock's Rebecca and from Suspicion. She was born 15 months later. Both sisters are citizens of the UK through birthright. Neither kid was super healthy as a child, and so just 3 years after Olivia was born, Lillian persuaded her husband to let her take the kids back to England for a better climate. They started sailing out, and they stopped in San Francisco because Olivia had tonsillitis. And then Joan developed pneumonia while they were there. And so Lillian was just like, fuck it, we live in California.
Wait a second. They were trying to get from Japan to the UK.
Yep. Taking the long way.
I don't know if there's a short way, I guess. But yeah, it feels like if I was on a fucking boat from Japan to England, I'd be like, you know what? California's a pretty fucking good place to stop.
I'm fine. I'm good.
Yeah.
No more seasickness. We're good.
Yeah.
I once said to my mother, whatever happened to the goat we had in San Francisco? And she said, that wasn't San Francisco, that was Japan. Mm-hmm. And there was a goat on the property because it was the fashion in those days to give very young children goat's milk instead of cow's milk. Mm-hmm. And that's why the goat was on the property. Mm-hmm. Then I have other memories. I can see my mother very clearly standing, I thought, having a fitting, but she might have been selecting fabrics for some purpose. It was before lunchtime, and there were wonderful scraps of silk on the floor all around her. Mm-hmm. I couldn't stand up. I was crawling then, and it was lovely to crawl around among these beautiful scraps of fabric.
And Walter was like, I don't know, I've been sleeping with the housekeeper. And so he leaves them, goes back to Japan, and
he's
eventually,
like, Tokyo's pretty lit, so I'm gonna stay.
He eventually marries their housekeeper. Olivia was big in the arts as a kid. You know, she did ballet lessons. She did piano at the age of 5. She learned to read before she was 6. Her mother would teach her drama, music, and elocution lessons, and she had her recite passages from Shakespeare. This is good. This is a perfect time for me to do this. She had her recite passages from Shakespeare in order to strengthen Olivia's diction.
Do you think, like, the mom, I mean, she was a stage actress, I guess, but, like, she must have been, like, a very frou-frou English woman.
Yeah.
If she was, like, elocution and ballet and music, you know? Like, that's, like, the vibe I'm getting. Especially, and, like, God, if you and your sister are not, like, just 1 year apart, I can imagine already the seeds of trouble.
It begins. And, you know, during the Joan Crawford episode, we talked about, you know, Joan's famous feud with Bette Davis. But I think there is no better feud in classic Hollywood than maybe the feud between Olivia de Havilland and her sister, Joan Fontaine. Essentially, she starts becoming, or seemingly, I don't want to slander anybody, even if they are dead, seemingly starts becoming very jealous of Joan because she doesn't like having to share a lot of things with her, like birthdays. And, you know, according to some books, and I've heard it told multiple different ways, but at the age of 9, Olivia wrote herself her own will. And in the will, she wrote, "To my sister Joan, I bequeath my beauty, for she has none."
Holy shit.
I've also heard that she wrote, "I bequeath my ability to attract boys, for she has none."
Wow. The library was open.
Yeah, exactly. I like beauty better because she was a fucking 9-year-old and it's less creepy there.
I love just being at 9, being able to, like, have those high reads and ready to fucking go on your, like, little sister.
Exactly.
Oh, God.
She took the glasses off and RuPaul was like, "You won the reading challenge."
Yeah. God. It's like a villain origin story.
So yeah, there was always tension there. In April of 1925, when Lillian's divorce was finalized, she married George Milan Fontaine, who was a department store manager for O.A. Hale and Co. in San Jose. He was supposedly like a good provider and like people liked him as a businessman, but he was super strict with these girls, and neither of them particularly cared for him. So they lived there for a while. She gets her education. In 1933, de Havilland made her debut in amateur theater in Alice in Wonderland, which was a production of the Saratoga Community Players. She began appearing in lots of other plays, Merchant of Venice, Hansel and Gretel. She played Lizzie Bennet in Pride and Prejudice. And actually that led to a huge confrontation between her and George Fontaine, because he told her she had to choose between staying home and appearing in the production and not being allowed home. So she went and fucking performed and then moved in with a friend of her mom.
Wow.
Yeah. She graduated in 1934, where she was offered a scholarship to Mills College in Oakland, which she was going to be an English teacher. But
I had no idea that she was a Bay Area queen. That's amazing. I love it so much.
So while she's there, she gets offered the role of Puck in the Saratoga Community Theater production of Midsummer Night's Dream. That same summer, Austrian director Max Reinhardt had come to California for a major new production of the same play that was going to premiere at the Hollywood Bowl. And one of his assistants saw her perform Puck in Saratoga and offered her the second understudy position for the role of Hermia in this Hollywood Bowl production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Can you imagine?
That was one of the first movies I watched, and I didn't even know that it was her first thing.
It's her first movie. A couple of movies she made afterwards came out before it, but it was her first film, yeah.
Oh, so she did the play for him first.
She did the play. But so she's the second understudy in the play. 1 week before the show goes up, the first understudy, Jean Rivero, had to back out, and the lead actress had to back out. That lead actress is Gloria Stewart, who was in the original Invisible Man and would later go on to be the older version of Rose in Titanic.
What?
Yep.
Gloria Stewart was her name. And since her film, which curiously enough was at Warner Brothers, was prolonged, she couldn't go on opening night, and so he came up to me 5 nights before the premiere and said, "You will play the part."
She's 18 at the time, and Reinhardt loves the 4 weeks of the tour with her so much that when Warner Brothers offers him a chance to film the play as a movie, he offers her the role. She's one of the only people in the cast that he takes from the play to the movie. And in all honesty, at first she was like, "No, ma'am, I'm going to be a teacher."
What?
Yeah.
Warner's wouldn't let me play Hermia in Midsummer Night's Dream unless I agreed to sign a long-term contract, which I didn't want to do. I wanted to go to Mills College. But Reinhardt thought me most unreasonable, and he backed me into the office of the casting director, and I said, "Well, not 7 years, 5 years, 5 years." And they said, "Well, okay, 5 years."
And so November 12th, 1934, at a starting salary of $200 a week, she started her career as a professional actor, which would span more than 50 years.
Wow. And I mean, that movie is gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
It's free on, like, literally, if you look it up on your Roku, it's free on one of those, like, random fucking sites. And it's just, like, I don't know if it's, like, the best movie ever or, like, best production of it, but it's gorgeous.
And it's surprisingly good. I agree. I don't know if it's the best one. It's really good, though.
The sets are beautiful. Like, there's, like, you can tell that they are giving the space for dance and costumes and light, and the sets, it's opulent, extravagant, it's really something to see. Mickey Rooney's performance as Puck is unhinged.
Yeah,
and
it's the worst.
That fucking laugh, I was like mute, could not.
Yeah,
like the tiniest little Mickey Rooney.
Also on the set, which sort of sucked a little bit, Reinhardt couldn't really speak English, so they brought in William Dieterle to translate his directions to everybody. And Olivia de Havilland really credited Dieterle as giving her sort of her on-camera acting techniques. And she said she also learned a lot from cinematographer Hal Moore, who actually ended up impressed because she would ask him questions about his work, which a lot of actors weren't doing at the time. And by the end of filming, she had learned the effect of lighting camera angles on how she appeared on screen and how to find her best lighting, which is something she will carry with her for the rest of her career, which I love.
She knows how to find the light. She knows how to find the light.
We must starve our sight from lovers' food till morrow, deep midnight. Oh, my good Lysander.
You know, she starts doing, as you mentioned, minor comedies. She does Alibi Ike and The Irish in Us with James Cagney. This will not be the last time she works with James Cagney. And then Warner Brothers decides to do something a little crazy. Because of lack of success during the Great Depression, Warner Brothers decided costume films that, you know, the type of stuff MGM had been doing wouldn't do that well. But they had this script for Captain Blood, which was to be directed by Michael Curtiz. And they were like, you know what? Why don't we cast a couple unknowns? That way we're not losing a ton if it fails. And so they pair Olivia de Havilland up with Errol Flynn for the first time. And this creates one of the classic on-screen pairings.
Right.
They had never met each other before.
Errol was a stuntman, right?
Yeah, and he was handsome as fuck, possibly a Nazi spy, but we won't talk about that now. And yeah, just charming and loved the camera, and the camera loved him. And I'm trying to think of, like, you know, I guess the first Pirates movie had already happened after the Lord of the Rings, right? But
That sounds right.
But if you think about, like, if Pirates hadn't had Johnny Depp,
Right.
it's almost the same thing Disney did with by casting Orlando Bloom and Keira Knightley, who were, like, not big budget movie leaders. And that's what they're doing with Captain Blood. Captain Blood is a swashbuckling high seas adventure in which Errol Flynn gets sold into slavery, and Olivia de Havilland buys him, and then he gets his freedom by becoming a pirate. And it also creates the classic model they will have for basically all their films, where she starts out by being like, I hate you. And then by the final act is like, I love you.
Yeah. Classic.
I've seen your pirate ways. I've seen myself bargained for and fought over. A combat between jackals. You pirates are used to taking what you want without the formality of purchase.
I'm thief and pirate, and I'll show you how a thief and a pirate can deal.
I advise you to go back to your ladies at Tortuga, who are thrilled by your bold, lawless ways.
What matters is that now I own you as once you own me. You're mine, do you understand? Mine to do with as I please.
Yeah, Captain Blood is good until it's not. I have some issues. I saw Captain Blood originally in college. I had a teacher who loved it, and I remember being like, oh, this is fun. And I rewatched it for this, and I was like, this is not as fun as I remember. Yeah. But they do have the chemistry. Like, I'm shocked that they did not burn the nitrate film every time that they were together, because
it's steamy.
Yeah, they got it. And it's funny too, because she talks about all the years, you know, the stuff, like, she had such a crush on him. And
oh yeah, the story of them and their like kind of missed romantic situation is very suspicious.
We'll get to her other romances later, but I'll just tell this anecdote now. You know, he was married, but he was in the process of separating from his wife, and in the 40s, they were at a party together.
And I thought, this is going to be a scandal. It's going to be something awful. And he had been very attentive and charming to me, and I sort of tried to avoid all those 50,000 photographers that were always present with their flashlights. And then afterwards, we went downstairs to the Coconut Grove. One photographer got that picture, and we danced to Sweet Lilani.
They were dancing, and he finally admitted to being in love with her, and she told him she wouldn't do anything until he'd left his wife, and then a month later he got back together with his wife.
I know. Can you believe?
She almost had it.
Katy Perry, the one who got away.
I have another anecdote about them, but I think I'll tell it later. So
fair enough.
And from there, like, you know, literally her career just takes off. She's in
it's like it was like cast in a bunch of, and like kind of what I was talking about, like a lot of these movies where she's just like the ingenue. I mean,
yes.
she was so young, right? She was 18 or something?
Yeah, she was a little older now, because she was 18 when she was in Midsummer, but she, you know, late teens, early 20s, you know.
Right. And I just can't imagine, and they're basically like, yeah, play the love interest and all these. I swear to God, I watched Anthony Adverse. I could not tell you what that movie's about. Jesus Christ.
You know, her and Flynn do The Charge of the Light Brigade. And like you said, a lot of these are just smaller comedies. I think probably my two favorites from this era. But once again, it's just kind of the young ingenue. But I loved 1937, It's Love I'm After, in which she plays sort of a foil for Leslie Howard and Bette Davis. They're both actors. She's a big fan of Leslie Howard. He like gets hired to break her crush on him, and it only makes her want him more. And it's one of those fun sort of ditzy roles, but it's also very quickly paced, and it's got that great crackling dialogue. She's so good at it. And then there's also a James Whale comedy from 1937 called The Great Garrick. And in it, there's a English actor who's going to go to France, but he's insulted the Comédie de France. And so they've decided to teach him a lesson, and he figures it out right away that he's basically now part of this play. They take over a hotel and try and give him, like, you know, at the ultimate type of play that he's a part of. But she crashes the hotel technically, and he thinks she's also one of the actors, and she actually is falling in love with him. And she's
bits and skits, lots of bits and skits.
Absolutely. And that movie is, first of all, fucking hilarious. Even for 37, like, still maintains. But also, she's so good, and she looks so amazing in that period, you know, that, like, I don't know, the 1700 France period clothing. Oh, she looks amazing. Yeah. But yeah, most of the films in the late 30s until you get to 38, really.
Right. You get Robin Hood, right? Which is like the big, I mean, it wasn't like one of the most successful movies of the year or something. Like,
absolutely.
So much money.
This gorgeous Technicolor adaptation of The Adventures of Robin Hood, starring Errol Flynn once again as Robin Hood, and Basil Rathbone as Guy de Gisbane, or Guy de Gisbane, if you will. And I frickin' love Basil Rathbone, great villain in anything. Also really good Sherlock Holmes. So I guess he is a villain. And,
lol.
And you did get a chance to see Robin Hood.
I saw Robin Hood, yeah. Loved, I mean, the movie's what it is, you know, but I was just mostly like, they really said color, honey. They're like, we're paying for the Technicolor. We want costumes. We want to see, like, tights. I was like, damn.
It is literally the movie that we've patterned our idea of Robin Hood after for so long. I mean, even the Disney cartoon from the 50s looks like this movie. Yeah. And so I don't know. I think it's so funny, but you're right. Especially my favorite costume is towards the end, King Richard the Lionhearted and his men come back, and they're like hiding in multicolor robes, with like satin lining, and I was just like, oh, did they just have those laying around?
Right, just, escaping from wherever they're escaping from.
Disguise yourselves. Did you steal them from the Gay Men's Choir of New York City?
Very that. They're coordinated and they look cute. You can't escape without looking cute.
Yeah, it's a genuinely fun movie, and like I don't know, I love it a lot. That's another movie I'd seen before, but I rewatched it this time and had sort of the reverse reaction of Captain Blood, where I was like, oh, I'm having so much more fun than I think I had. It's also Michael Curtiz.
You're a strange man.
Strange? Because I can feel for beaten, helpless people?
No, you're strange because you want to do something about it. You're willing to risk your own life. And one of those men was a Norman.
Norman or Saxon? What's that matter? It's injustice I hate, not the Normans.
But it's lost you your rank, your lands. It's made you a hunted outlaw when you might have lived in comfort and security. What's your reward for all this?
Reward? You just don't understand, do you?
Robin Hood's a huge success. So she thinks, wow, Warner Brothers, they really got my back and they're going to make me a huge star. Nope.
This is like a running theme for her career, huh? She's like, okay, I did it. Finally, I'm here. Just to like be fucking, one of the brothers being like, no.
Yeah. They cast her in romantic comedy Force a Crowd, in another romantic comedy Hard to Get. They cast her in the war movie Wings of the Navy. In 1939, she does Dodge City, which is another Technicolor wonder by Michael Curtiz. It's another Errol Flynn film.
I think like the saloon fight seems like,
and the saloon fight was like a technical marvel as well for the time period.
I was like, I cannot believe how much work goes into these things. But I guess, was that her first Western?
That was her first Western. I believe that was Errol Flynn's first Western. They still have a lot of great chemistry. He looks like, could his eyes sparkle more?
Yeah. I think this is a movie where you see him as like a stuntman really putting in his like work, because I was like, oh my God, this movie is kind of, the fight of in that saloon is, to me, was what stood out the most.
She was like, fine, I'll do your Western, but let me be the saloon keeper played by Ann Sheridan. And they were like, no. So she gets stuck in the same old role again. And she later said, Dodge City was a emotional low point in her career. She said she was in such a depressed state that she could hardly remember any of her lines. And so she's having a real shitty time at Warner Brothers. But luckily, David O. Selznick writes a little note over to Warner Brothers to say, hey, I'm making this little film. It's called Gone with the Wind. You may have heard of it. Everybody wants to be Scarlet. And he's like, I'd really like Olivia in her contract to come over here and play Melanie. Now, I don't want to get into this too much, because I really want to recommend that if you want to know more about the studio system, we've covered it extensively in our Joan Crawford episode and in our Cary Grant episode. But essentially, actors back then would get tied to these contracts and they'd be forced to basically do whatever the studio asked of them at the time. Other studios could request you on loan, but for the most part, you were tied to however many movies you'd agreed, or however many years you agreed to work for a studio. At first, Jack Warner,
he said, "No, ma'am."
Yeah, he was
no,
like,
"Ma'am."
And so behind Jack Warner's back, de Havilland's like, I'm going to invite his wife to tea. She takes her to tea at the Brown Derby.
I explained how much the part meant to me. And I said, would you help me? She said, I understand you, and I will help you. And it was through her that Jack eventually agreed. And he says so in his biography.
All the women in Hollywood wanted to be Scarlet, but she wanted to be Melanie.
Which is the most wild fucking thing to me, because Scarlet is the worst. Like, I had never seen this movie before. You can find my tweet thread about my viewing experience.
It's a very good tweet thread.
Thank you. Scarlett O'Hara is just like not a good person. I don't know. Also, Vivian Leigh, who plays her, I just don't think she was like all that, you know?
I don't know if I can follow you down that path. I agree. Scarlett's awful, but
I just don't like, I don't get it. I don't get it. I'm sorry, she doesn't have the range.
She said of the role of Melanie was someone different. She had very deeply feminine qualities that I felt were very endangered at the time, and they are from generation to generation, and that somehow they should be kept alive. And that's why I wanted to interpret her role. The main thing is that she's always thinking of the other person, and the interesting thing to me is that she was a happy person, loving, compassionate. And I think that really sums up how she plays Melanie in the movie. I didn't rewatch Gone with the Wind because I've seen it about 1 billion times. My mom loves that movie. But I've always loved her performance as Melanie. But once again,
Miss Melanie. She was, I mean, the thing that's interesting about, I mean, so her portrayal of Melanie to me, is she was able to, you get the sense that she's, even though she's always being very nice and generous, she doesn't seem naive. She's not playing the fool, you know? Even though Scarlett is literally the entire movie trying to fuck her husband and, like, take him away, she treats Scarlett with respect and dignity. She is not going to be brought down into, like, the dirt and the mud of Scarlett and her fucking antics. And I find it very fucking weird that every review and every write-up I read calls Scarlett O'Hara as a, like, high-spirited woman. Fuck that. She's a bitch. She's not a good person. And she is truly, I think, the best part. And not only because she's a good person, but because you know that she is smart and she is good and she is, you know, I don't know. You don't get the sense she's being taken advantage of, which I appreciated.
Scarlett, you look. The W's at the end. Wellman, Wendell, White, Whitner, Wilkins, Williams, Woolsey, Scarlett! You passed him. Oh, he isn't there. He isn't there. Ashley's safe. He isn't listed. Oh, he's safe. He's safe. Oh, Scarlett, you're so sweet to worry about Ashley like this for me.
So Olivia comes off of Gone with the Wind once again being like, I'm a star. I got nominated for an Academy Award. This is great. Everything's going fine. And Warner Brothers was like, nope. They put her in a role in The Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex, which is a great movie starring Bette Davis and Errol Flynn. And what happens? She's not the queen. She's playing Bette Davis's lady in waiting. And also on top of that, she is famously his love interest. She is not his love interest in this movie.
I'm just reading in the New York Times obit of her when she complained about these formulaic roles that kept coming. They told her that she had been hired because she photographed well and she wasn't required to act, which is a very, you know, fucking brazen and cruel thing to say to a woman who is literally bringing in so much money for this stupid fucking company and has proven herself. Like, she's playing the game. She is playing the game, but they have rigged it all against her. And I can only imagine her frustration.
She has a number of movies that come out just in that short year alone. My Love Came Back, Raffles. Her next big hit really is Santa Fe Trail. And it ends up being one of the top grossing films of 1940. But she ends up missing the premiere because she starts having stomach pain. And then she gets diagnosed with appendicitis and rushed into surgery.
Well, that's also around the time when she started just straight up refusing roles.
Well,
right?
So she has like a very long convalescence at a Los Angeles hospital, and Warner Brothers is like, well, we want you in this, we want you in this. And she's like, nope. She does take a role in 41 in The Strawberry Blonde. Raoul Walsh directs it. She's once again up against James Cagney. That is an adorable movie.
It's adorable.
Yeah,
it's cute.
I like that a lot. But I love the character she plays in the first half of the movie. I don't know where that character goes in the second half of the movie.
Right. The best part of that movie is when, like, they're trying to... Who does she play up against in that movie? The other woman?
She's Rita Hayworth.
They're so
Giving
good together.
Face.
Yes. Hair, body, face. It's the best part is when they're, like, in the park being like, oh, we just happened to be here. We're not here meeting boys. And then, like, of course the boys show up and Olivia's character is like, get the fuck over it, girl. We know what we're here for. Like, we're either in or we're out.
Exactly.
It's so funny.
Amy.
Yes, dear. If there's something in your eye, Amy, I'll help you get it out.
Oh, bosh, there's nothing in my eye. I just plain and simple winked at him, that's all.
No, Amy. Either he's an old friend of the family's or there's something in your eye.
I never saw him before in my life until a few minutes ago when I passed Fisher's drugstore.
Oh, Amy, he followed you here?
No. I followed him.
Oh, Amy.
That film, huge critical commercial success. She goes on to be in Mitch Leeson's Hold Back the Dawn with Charles Boyer. And this is, you know, sort of where she starts to find herself. She plays, a teacher while in Mexico who feels drawn to Charles Boyer's character. He's a sophisticated European gigolo, and it's like very much a sexual awakening. And he marries her as like a scheme to get across the border into the US, because back in the day, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but there was a quota system about how many people could come from a certain country in the US, and the Romanian quota was very, very small. And so he would have had to wait in Mexico essentially for 8 years, which is why it's frustrating when people say nowadays, like, why don't people just do it the legal way? Because even though the quotas are much bigger now, sometimes there are people who are still on waiting lists for like 10 to 15 years. I digress. She falls in love with this man. She finds out he might be a louse. They get kind of back together and whatnot. And she gets her second Academy Award nomination, this time for Best Actress for this movie. She does John Huston's In This Our Life, which I just want to bring up because it's another film that she does with Bette Davis. And there's a scene in it where she like looks at a portrait and she's like talking about Bette Davis. She got the looks of the family. And it killed me because I love Bette Davis. And I think Bette Davis is a beautiful, beautiful woman, but like up against Olivia de Havilland.
Yeah. Well, also Betty famously thought she was herself was not a looker, if you will.
But I also want to mention that movie because there is some actually like really good race relation stuff in that movie. And I don't know how much of a hand Olivia de Havilland had in it, but I did read something that she sort of pushed for those scenes to be beefed up, and because John Huston was the director, he sort of really let that go. But it also didn't hurt that she was fucking him at the time and continued to do so for 3 years. So,
never hurts.
But I don't think there's a lot of movies from that era in which they discuss blackness and the way black people are treated that are as interesting as that movie. And it's a small part of the film, but it's worth looking into for that.
This is also the time though, like when she starts refusing roles, Warner Brothers is like, they're literally suspending her, and they're fining her, for all this time, essentially that they've allegedly quote unquote lost, right, when she's declining these movies, which I guess is just building up this impending big blow up that's about to happen.
Oh,
because
it is about to happen.
And it's about to happen. And it's wild. It's like she has this like second nomination. She's like even more emboldened to be like, enough. Because essentially she was, I think, on contract for 7 years, and it had come to an end, and they were like, nice try, bitch. All those suspensions, we're putting an extra 6 months on your contract. And she said, I don't think so, honey.
She's no longer putting up with this. She's not going to do her extension. She tells Warner Brothers no. And on advice from her lawyer, Martin Gang, she files suit against Warner Brothers in Los Angeles County Superior Court to seek a declaratory judgment that she was no longer bound by her contract because there was an existing section of the California Labor Code that forbade an employer from enforcing a contract against an employee for longer than 7 years from the date of the first performance. And Superior Court was like, gotta hand it to her.
You're like, well, you got us there, gal.
And I had 6 months of suspension time to go, and yet was being suspended on extension time. So it could go on forever, could have gone on for many years like that. You couldn't work at all at anything at all, because the contracts were for exclusive personal services.
The court case lasted about a year, but it landed in her favor, and it ended up being one of the most significant and far-reaching legal rulings in Hollywood because it really reduced the power of the studios. As we mentioned, studio system, you're locked in, and this was the actors finally standing up for themselves to say, no, we are performers. We deserve creative freedom in our line of work. California's resulting 7-year rule is still actually known as the de Havilland Law. A lot of people call it that. So Hollywood actually owes her a great deal. But it did cost her a lot. It cost her $13,000, which in last year would have cost about $190,000 in legal fees. But she was very respected by her peers, and even her own sister, whom they were still fighting, said Hollywood owes Olivia a great deal.
Didn't she not work for a while?
And here we go. And Jack Warner's like, not so fast. And he blacklists her. And essentially, he basically tells every studio, do not work with her. She is difficult. She is a lady that you do not want on your sets. And for 3 years, she does not do another film.
Wow.
She takes the time to become a naturalized citizen. I guess you're not working. Got to do something. But
he called up all his girls and said, do not trust this fugly slut. She is a bitch.
He wrote her name in the burn book and it passed it around to everyone at the school. That's how that movie ends, right? Anyway.
Yep.
And they all side with her. She gets naturalized 10 days before we enter World War II. So what she ends up doing with a lot of that time is she ends up doing USO tours.
But now that I was enjoying from working, I was free. And the USO asked me, they said, you can't sing and you can't dance. Would you consider visiting our military patients in military hospitals in the Christmas season of 1943? And I said, oh, yes, I certainly would.
She joins the Hollywood Victory Canteen, and really she's helping raise money for the troops through war bonds and entertaining the troops while at war. She said later in life, I love doing those tours because it was a way I could serve my country and contribute to the war effort. So in 1945, blacklisting virtually gone. Court of Appeals done. She takes a role in Michael Leeson's To Each His Own. Michael Leeson was the director of Hold Back the Dawn, and when she got this script for Each His Own, she was like, I want to work with Michael Leeson. And here's why, and I think this is very important. Michael Leeson treated her like an actor. He asked her questions about who she was and what she was doing, why her character would feel that way. And she said, a lot of the other directors she'd worked with, even Michael Curtiz, were basically like, smile.
Right.
And so she knew this was a director she could trust, that she'd worked with really well. And so she selects him to direct To Each His Own. To Each His Own is a movie, as I mentioned, 1946. She plays an unwed mother who, after a one-night stand, gives a child up for adoption, kind of. She, basically leaves the child, and then it gets adopted by a sort of romantic rival of hers. And it destroys her life. She spends the rest of her life becoming sort of embittered and trying to get her child back.
It's kind of like an error type thing. Like, she wants to give it up, but it'll come to her. And then they're like, oh no, well, we give it to this family because they lost. So she doesn't want to give up this child. She just doesn't want to have the drama of it all. She's intending to somehow get it back. It doesn't work out. And then she tries to get it back later. And it's the whole thing. She also plays 30 years of this woman's life, right?
Yes. She plays young and old in the film.
She is olded up. In the movie has some flashback situation going on. After the beginning of the movie, I was like, oh my gosh, she's in some old age makeup right now.
And it's good old age makeup. I mean, it's makeup. It's very clearly makeup, but
I think she's so good at that though, because she has different ranges, and we're going to see and especially in her upcoming movies where she's able to turn up her I'm a cutesy girl charm, and then turn in the stern kind of hardened woman.
Yes.
And so she has that range, and she really flexes those muscles, especially in this movie.
What are you going to tell Corinne, Judy?
I'll tell her he's mine. I'll tell everybody he's mine.
No, you won't, Judy.
Oh, I know this is awful for you.
I'm not thinking of me. In my state of health, the scandal won't matter to me. Not for long.
Well, if you're worried about me and my reputation...
You're grown up. I'm not thinking of you. I'm thinking of that baby.
He's mine.
I've got a share in him, too. He's my grandson, and he's not going to suffer for your fault. He's not going to be brought up a marked child. If the people of this town so much as suspect he's yours, that little fellow's life won't be worth living.
I can't give him up.
You've got to.
No.
It wasn't my favorite movie, but I was definitely impressed by her performance.
I'll be honest, I loved it. I had never seen it before. I was in tears by the end. I thought her performance was so moving and so genuine. And I don't know, I was really impressed by it. I was like, damn, she's got it.
It's definitely like the classic Hollywood, like, feel good, coming, finally breaking through, doing the thing.
And I was just kind of proud of the fact that they were talking about, like, you know, the social mores at the time. It was sort of like, is her child better off being raised by somebody else because she would have been a single mother? Or, you know, or was she better off? Because she certainly wasn't. And like, she ends up doing the right thing because she gets him back at one point. She essentially blackmails her, his adoptive parents to giving her, and then he's unhappy. And she spends her entire life trying to make him happy, and it ruins her. And it's like, should society be allowed to destroy a woman's entire life just because she slept with a man she thought she was in love with and then he died?
Right.
You know, I don't know. I was impressed by that because I feel like there's not as many, there's once again, it's deeper than I was expecting for the time period.
I will say though, the ending though, like with, I know this is not a spoiler, but like there's a man who she's telling the story to, and he kind of in the end is like, oh, bippity boppity boop. Let's just take care of a couple of things. There are a lot of good moments in this movie, and I think her performance is really good, and the story is really well done. But it's still like an aged 1946 movie.
Yeah. I do want to say about her acting style. So as we mentioned, she was never formally trained as an actor. So she ends up reading Stanislavski's autobiography, My Life in Art. And she decided, you know, this time I'm gonna go method. And I love this story about how she went method for this. She used a different perfume for the different parts of her life.
I love that. Oh. She said, young me would wear Curve, but when I grow up, I would wear Elizabeth Arden. I don't know. I just made up fucking things.
White Diamonds by Liz Taylor.
Yes,
these have always brought me luck.
Yes.
But it pays off because this is finally her Academy Award. She wins Best Actress at the 1946 Oscars. This will be her first Oscars. And it's sort of seen as a culmination of her struggle to be respected and to be rewarded for a good work. Now, we mentioned the feud with her sister. It only gets worse. The 1942 Academy Awards, Olivia de Havilland was nominated for Hold Back the Dawn. As we mentioned, it was her first Best Actress nomination. She was up against her sister Joan Fontaine for Alfred Hitchcock's Suspicion. Joan Fontaine wins.
Yes, she does.
And this is like reignition. Just like, nope, not gonna fuck with her, whatever. So when Olivia wins her award for To Each His Own, Joan goes to congratulate her, and she fucking ignores her.
Well, because didn't she not talk to her when she won?
Yeah.
So like it was kind of like, well, you didn't say congrats to me, and but you didn't say JK. Like it's very that.
Exactly.
Also, I wanted to mention quickly. So is it? I don't know if you know this or not, but I think I read that Joan Fontaine goes by Joan Fontaine because Warner was like, we can only have one de Havilland in Hollywood.
See, I read it was, and this is the problem with doing this, but like I read it was her mother who was like, we can only have one de Havilland, and so, but I also read that Joan Fontaine said that when she was trying to get a movie contract, she was like, you can't go to Warner Brothers. That's Olivia's studio.
Yeah. So. And oh god, which is just like
so
crazy,
just pitting them against each other,
right? But yeah, so we're in 1946. You know, Olivia has fucking slain big Hollywood, and she's now like proudly holding on to her first Oscar statuette, and yet still has this nasty feud going on with her sister, who is like, oh, you finally got one? That's cute.
In 46, she also does Dark Mirror, in which she plays twin sisters, which was a big thing back then.
Oh my god!
Betty Davis did it twice, so like, yeah, people love that sort of
Dark
thing.
Mirror, which is just like one of the twins is evil, so that's just how that is. So watch out.
Exactly. They're just an evil twin. That's how the cookie crumbles.
Sorry, twins are bad. Later
that year, she was appearing in a summer stock theater production of What Every Woman Knows. And she begins dating Marcus Goodrick, who is a U.S. Navy veteran, a journalist, and an author, and they marry each other in August 26th of 1946. In 48, she does one of her most challenging performances. She's in the movie The Snake Pit, in which she plays a schizophrenic woman who is in a mental hospital. And I really like this movie. I think her performance is really pretty great. You know, she to try and get into character, she consulted with psychiatrists, and she did, simulated electric shock and hydrotherapy to try and feel what a person would feel in this situation. And I think it's a surprisingly, there's some stuff, there's like an evil nurse, but I think once again, I think it's a much more delicate portrayal of it. This was basically the first realistic portrayal of a person with a mental issue like this that was handled seriously in a Hollywood film.
Right. And also it was handled, this character is able to go get treated and be released. It's not like, well, she, is a psycho person and she'll be that way forever. It was like, no, she is going and getting treated and she's able to overcome, or not overcome, but maybe is able to deal with these, issues of mental illness. It wasn't like this life sentence of like, and they locked her up forever.
Yes. And, she said, I met a young woman that was very much like Virginia, about the same age and physical description, as well as being schizophrenic with guilt problems. What struck me most of all was the fact that she was rather likable and appealing. It hadn't occurred to me before that a mental patient could be appealing. And it was that gave me the key to the performance. And people agreed. New York Film Critics Circle gave her the award for Best Actress, Academy Award nominee again for Best Actress. So she's just racking up those nominations and those awards, and that really culminates in 1949 in William Wyler's The Heiress. The Heiress, which is based off of a play of the same name and also the Henry James novel Washington Square, is about a young woman who lives with an overbearing father. She's set to inherit a lot of money. She's very naive, doesn't believe herself to be beautiful, and she sort of falls under.
It's not even that she doesn't believe she's beautiful. Her dad doesn't think she's beautiful.
Yeah, her dad. Well, that's the thing is she, her dad's genuinely a terrible human being. She falls in love with Montgomery Clift, and you spend the whole movie sort of wondering, does he love her for her money or does he love her in general? Which is funny because apparently it's much more clear in the play, and the studio was like, Montgomery Clift is a heartthrob, make it a little more vague. And I think the movie is much better because it's a little more vague.
Oh, it's the entire time I was like, oh God, is he lying or is he like for real? And I just kept thinking, like, in the end, what is the lesson? Is the lesson the movie's trying to tell us is like, listen to your dad and don't blah, or is it like follow your heart and love? And it's just like it really ratchets it up, and she does this like really weird thing, or not weird thing, but she has like a really like kind of sweet tiny voice at the beginning of the movie, and then by the end of it like she just lowers it all the way down, and it turns really like fucking hard. Ugh.
And this is another movie that she does like the role, like a 30-year performance. And so, yeah, it's a lot. It is if you're not in the mood to watch The Heiress, which you really should, you can always Google Carol Burnett's The Lady Heir. And there's a parody version of it by Carol Burnett. It's very worth your time. But that gets her second Academy Award. She wins again for Best Actress.
Your award for To Each His Own, I took as an incentive to venture forward. Thank you for this very generous assurance that I have not entirely failed to do so.
And then she takes some time off to have a kid.
No, yeah, I mean, you have 2 Oscars, I guess, now. Time for a kid.
Yeah. I'm being blasé. She wins, the New York Film Critics Circle Award, the Golden Globe Award. It's a big deal for her career. And, she follows it up by having a child, her son, and then turns down Blanche Dubois in A Streetcar Named Desire.
Yeah.
She said she couldn't relate to the character. And you know what?
Yeah, I'm a mother now. I can't do it.
Yep. Exactly. In 1950, she moved her family to New York City, and she makes one of the weirdest fucking decisions in her entire career. She decides to take the role of Juliet in Romeo and Juliet on Broadway. She had always wanted to play Juliet. It opened to mixed reviews because she was 35 fucking years old. So, like...
a spry 35.
Exactly. It closes after 45 performances, but she was like, no, I'm gonna conquer the stage. And so she does George Bernard Shaw's Candide in 52. That one ends up going on for a ton of sold out performances. So at the end she gets the last laugh, but I still just can't imagine.
This is also, like, after all that, she's like, you know what? I'm done with Hollywood. Doesn't she, like, leave to Paris?
Yep. Yeah. She divorces her husband. She travels to the Cannes Film Festival at the invitation of the French government. And, yeah, she ends up moving there. She meets Pierre Galante, who's an executive editor for French journal Paris Match. They marry. And, she settles there. She starts... But that doesn't deter her from working. She ends up doing Terrence Young's That Lady, which she plays a one-eyed Spanish princess who lost her eye in a sword fight over the love of King Philip II of Spain.
Of course.
Mm-hmm. She does Not as a Stranger in 55, The Ambassador's Daughter in 56. Both were not great. But she does have her second child, Giselle Galante, who was born in 1956. She ends up doing The Light in the Piazza in 62. And if you're catching on to this, she's slowing down. She's not doing as much, and she doesn't really have to. And in 62, and sort of in a way that seems to keep herself busy, but ends up getting great reviews, she writes her first book, and this book is called Every Frenchman Has One. And it's sort of it's like her being funny about French life and how she adapted.
American in France. Didn't she just like end up falling in love with Europe and was like, and this is like also though maybe the trip that her mother never and them never got to finish when they were on that boat to California.
I hadn't thought of that. That's so sweet.
She finally gets there and turns out she's like, everything's here is just so much like nicer and fancier and like more her like what she enjoys. I think I read somewhere that she like really just enjoyed like the cobblestone streets and like everything was real there, not like the artifice of Hollywood. And you know what? I love that for her. And I think that kind of also leads to this mystique of her. I mean, she dies in Paris. She ends up not leaving. She stays there.
And actually, I will say that's what made this episode a little harder, because there's not a lot of filmed interviews with her, because once she moved to Paris, she sort of stopped playing the Hollywood game. She's done a handful of retrospective interviews, things that are more towards the end of her life. But, outside of a couple episodes of Password, there wasn't a ton of interviews with her, which was a little frustrating, because I try and include as many sound clips as I can, and hopefully I'm doing a good job at that.
To learn about another culture and other people is an immense privilege and an exciting adventure. Not only that, but just living in Europe has been an extraordinary experience, because I have been living in a culture of peace. Those 19-year-old American boys, Omaha Beach and up and down that coast, they didn't die for nothing. Think of it, Europe with all these different countries, each country separate from the other in terms of history, culture, language. All of them for 2,000 years and more at war with each other. War is a very stupid way to settle a disagreement. Unthinkable, bestial, won't do. And in Europe, you have the feeling that the whole human race has been raised to another level.
In 64, she heads into a period that we brought up in the Joan Crawford episode, and it's the hagsploitation era. In 1964, she does Walter Grauman's Lady in a Cage, which is a thriller in which she's a woman trapped in an elevator, in one of those cage elevators in her home, because she had it installed because she broke her hip. She's trapped in between floors, and her house gets invaded by criminals. It was a box office success.
Really?
Yeah, nothing to shake a stick at, but the critics savaged it. Time magazine even went so far as saying it's very clear that Olivia would rather be remembered as a freak than forgotten.
Whew.
Yeah.
And the movie is crazy. I was like, I don't even know. It's clearly is like going for like this style, but also like just like the politics of it are so weird. It's almost like youths and like people who drink are invading the suburbs. No,
I will give it more credit because 2 reasons. One, I have always told anyone who would listen, I would love to remake this movie. This is on my list of like movies to remake. But 2, one of the things I really love about it, because I agree with you, on the surface, it does really feel like that. I think there's a couple choice lines from her character that really reveal, I mean, a choice, it's not just from her character, it's also from her son. She's not a good person either. And it's an interesting movie because you're watching a movie full of kind of bad people. Does she deserve the treatment she's getting? Absolutely not. Those kids are monsters. And it led by James Caan. It was his very first movie. He's doing Brando from Streetcar.
Oh yeah.
I've been some kind of inside since I was 9 years old.
Oh, I see. You're one of the many bits of offal produced by the welfare state. You're what so much of my tax dollars goes for the care and feeding of.
Well, I don't know from awful, but yeah. And I sure do want to thank you, man, for all them tax dollars. The food is lousy, though.
And you're like, oh, she's also maybe not great. And I think what's interesting about that is she's never going to come out of this situation better. Like, her character arc in that movie is she's only going to be worse. She's going to use this as an example of everything that she's been terrified of her entire life. And I think that's a weirdly fascinating thing to make a movie about.
She's a Facebook mom who's ready to rage.
Yeah, exactly. She's the type of person that's like, that comments on, a Facebook thing with, quote, peaceful protests.
Right.
And that's,
Yeah, exactly that. The whole idea of like being like, these are welfare kids and they are bad. I just don't like the policies of like showing them. Like, it'd be one thing if there are kids who, had circumstances that like, but like, I don't know, like this show, it was very like, look at these hoodlums. Right. And it's like, in what fucking world? Like, no. And also I was like, ma'am, you are in between like the second and third floor. A quick tumble down to the first floor would not kill you.
It's so funny, too. The guy that wrote the movie had to remove references to the fact that it was New York City because he found out every elevator in New York City has an emergency telephone, including private ones.
Yeah, I mean, the movie has to like jump through like, all these hoops to be like, and then this didn't work. I mean, not this.
Literally, Ann Southern is in the movie and she disappears because they lock her in a closet and she's never mentioned again. Mm-hmm. I don't want to belabor the point of Lady in a Cage, but I do think it's like weirdly fascinating. She goes on from that to star in Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte with, it's so hard to say. Everybody at home, don't try it. She stars in it with Bette Davis. She's replacing Joan Crawford, who's quote unquote ill. We discussed this in our Joan Crawford episode, but I will say she's so fucking good in this. I've seen this movie so many times. She's so fucking good. She's so fucking evil. And she also gets to be present for maybe Bette Davis's like crowning achievement as an actor, which is Bette Davis being so happy she gets to say bitch on film.
Yes, I told Jewel. And I told your father, too. Why wouldn't I? After all, I wasn't much more than a child then, and all I ever got in this house was people telling me how lucky I was, and your father always favoring you and holding you up as an example. Why wouldn't I tell him that his pure, darling little girl was having a dirty little affair with a married man? You're a vile, sorry little bitch!
To be in that room. And then mostly ends up, she does The Swarm, which is a big budget disaster movie. She ends up doing a lot of TV. She does Roots, The Next Generation. She makes her final film appearance in the movie called The Fifth Musketeer in 1979. She plays Queen Anne, and she has 2 lines and she's in 2 scenes, and I watched that entire fucking movie and I was very angry. And she gets a Golden Globe for Anastasia, The Mystery of Anna in 1986, in which she plays Dowager Empress Maria. And then her final film appearance anywhere is the HTV romantic TV film The Woman He Loved, which I watched as well, and is like a glowing portrait of Wallis Simpson, the woman that the Prince of Wales abdicated his throne for, and like totally leaves out the fact that she was a Nazi sympathizer and he was also a Nazi sympathizer, but that's fine. Olivia de Havilland plays Aunt Bessie Merriman, and she's it's not going to be my 1-star review, so I just want to get it out of the way. Out of all of the Southern accents she had to do in her entire career, the worst Southern accent. Like just a Wallace. Why are you marrying him? Like, yeah.
Okay. I'm happy to report that I stopped watching after Lady in a Cage. So.
Oh, did you? I don't blame you. And from there, like every other accolade she gets is about her career. 2003, she was a presenter at the 75th Academy Awards. In 2008, at the age of 92, she received the National Medal of the Arts, which is the highest honor conferred to an individual artist on behalf of the people of the United States. George W. Bush gave that to her. So sorry that she had to...
So sorry.
Yeah, she was a lifelong Democrat, so I'm sure she was like, great.
Thanks. You can mail it to me.
On September 9th of 2010, she was appointed Chevalier, which is a knight in the Legion of Honor, which is the highest decoration in France, awarded by President Nicolas Sarkozy. He ended up telling the actress, "You honor France by having chosen us," which I think is really sweet.
Cute.
And in June 2017, 2 weeks before her 101st birthday, she was appointed Dame Commander in the Order of the British Empire by Queen Elizabeth II. She's the oldest woman to ever receive that honor, and she said it was the most gratifying of birthday presents. Casual.
I mean, when you're 102 and the sister you hate has already died,
yeah,
it's like, what else can you get? What else can you ask for?
In terms of her personal life, we mentioned her husbands. She also had a romantic relationship with Jimmy Stewart. She was involved with Howard Hughes. She said, as I mentioned before, that she was had a 3-year relationship with John Huston. She said about John Huston, he was the man I wanted to marry. The anecdote about Errol Flynn I wanted to share was while she was shooting the movie The Swarm, she told Michael Caine that Errol Flynn once made a $100 bet in the 40s that he could have sex with her. And then she later went and showed him the spot in the Hollywood Hills in which he won that bet.
Wow.
Feisty lady.
Stop.
As I mentioned before, she was a lifelong liberal, though she drew the line at those communists. And she did actually in 1958 in a private meeting before the House of Un-American Activities recounted her experiences with the Independent Citizens Committee, who she thought were a little too far left. So no one is perfect, but I do think it's important to be like, she considered herself a righteous crusader, and then was also like, nope, I'm gonna tell tales.
Well, also, I bet you, she was very, support the troops, rah. And also, I think she clearly, I don't think it was an act that she was, this high, society woman like she was. And so I think part of that was obviously being very pro the government and doing the quote right American thing or what the fuck ever. But yeah, I think it's a career and just like a life of, she fought really hard fights and shaped Hollywood into what it is now. I think her best work literally came out of that struggle.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the late 40s into the early 50s, right after she had been like blacklisted and outcast from Hollywood. She came back just like fucking burning through Hollywood. And she did 4 or 5 movies, I'd say, from like from To Each His Own to like The Heiress, maybe My Cousin Rachel. And then she was like, you know what? I'm going to New York and doing theater that I've always wanted to do. I'm a 35-year-old Juliet. I don't care. And then she fucking says peace and goes to Paris. Like, I don't know a more iconic, like, kind of being like, peace. I fucking told you guys.
Right.
I'm out.
And that's what I love about her is she's like, I did the thing. I did it. Like, I don't need to. And that's, I think, what's sort of frustrating. And it's, I mean, there was also, we've talked about this and it still goes on. There's also a law of diminishing returns when it comes to Hollywood and women aging.
Oh yeah,
and
for sure.
I think it's very telling that within like 6 years of doing The Ambassador's Daughter, in which she's playing like the young flighty love interest of a character, she's playing the mom in The Light in the Piazza, and suddenly they've just decided she's like too old to be the young ingenue again. And not that I would want to see her playing the ingenue. I was glad she moved on from that, but it's frustrating that decision gets made, that suddenly you're over that imaginary hill. And I like the fact that she was like, I don't need this. I don't have to do this.
Right.
And I've made my money. I've made my mark. And I'm going to go now. We mentioned the feud with her sister. After she divorced her first husband, they started talking to each other again. They ended up even spending Christmas together in 1961. Unfortunately, they started disagreeing over their mother's cancer treatment. Joan Fontaine believed her mother wanted to die, and Olivia de Havilland was like, I will fucking pay anything I can to keep her alive. And so they stopped talking to each other again. And then their mother died, and Fontaine claimed that de Havilland hadn't told her that her mother had died.
Wow.
But the truth is that de Havilland had sent her a telegram. It just took 2 weeks to get there. They still didn't talk to each other all the way up to Fontaine's death. In fact, I read reports that Fontaine stopped talking to her daughters because they would talk to Olivia de Havilland.
That's right. I think I read that too. Yeah.
So in 2013, December 15th, Joan Fontaine died, and de Havilland said she was shocked and saddened. And I think that's the true, like, best wishes, have a good summer. But the other feud I wanted to talk about was as an amazing final act, Ryan Murphy creates a TV show called Feud, Betty and Joan, in which he casts Catherine Zeta-Jones to play Olivia de Havilland. I don't know in what world.
I don't know this man.
Yeah. And Olivia de Havilland, right before her 101st birthday, filed a lawsuit against FX Network and Ryan Murphy for inaccurately portraying her and using her likeness without permission. FX tried to, strike the suit, basically saying it was a slap lawsuit. But it went through, but then she ended up losing on appeal. A 3-justice panel from the California Court of Appeals in the Second District ruled against the defamation suit, which I think is a little strange because I've heard of people being like parody, but this wasn't parody. This was literally them putting the words in the mouth of somebody who's living.
Right.
Because her like statement I thought was that very factual. She was like, I purposely stayed out of this kind of gossip when I was in Hollywood. This was not my thing. Yeah.
I think it's probably just hard when it comes to like defamation. Like they're like, well, did you lose anything like monetarily?
Right.
Did you lose jobs? It's like nothing. It was so, not to say that Ryan Murphy is right, but I think in the eyes of the law, it's like, but it is strange that he made money using her name. I don't think it was I don't think it was defamation, but I think it's definitely like, bitch, that's my likeness and that's my name. You like,
maybe they saw Catherine Zeta-Jones and they're like, well, he didn't get likeness down, so
wow, drag.
But as you mentioned, I think one of my favorite things about Olivia de Havilland is that she spent her life doing it her own way, and when people told her no, she was like, no. I'm not going to accept that as the answer. I'm going to find a way around. And I think that's what really makes her great and makes her a legendary star. And with that, I think we should move into our picks.
Let's do it.
My 1-star review is a little film, and by little, I mean insanely long movie, from 1978 called The Swarm.
Okay.
This is one of Olivia's last films, and I can understand why. The Swarm is a film. It is a Irwin Allen film. We've mentioned Irwin Allen before because in our Sally Field episode, we talked about Beyond the Poseidon Adventure, which I'm pretty sure was my 1-star review there, too.
I think it was.
This is a disaster film about killer bees coming and attacking. Yeah. And it's one of those, like, bloated
murder hornets.
Yeah, exactly. It's Murder Hornets, the prequel. It's one of those overstuffed, overpacked, overcast films. The lead is Michael Caine. Everybody else that's in it's Catherine Ross, Richard Widmark, Richard Chamberlain, Olivia de Havilland, Ben Johnson, Lee Grant, Jose Ferrer, Patty Duke, Slim Pickens, Bradford Dillman, Fred McMurray in his final role, and Henry Fonda. In fact, Michael Caine was once saying, I was in The Swarm, but so was Henry Fonda. Why do I keep getting blamed for it?
We were all there.
We were all there. I don't know how to get too much into this because it's as ridiculous as it sounds. Like, essentially, killer bees have come and they like take over a military base first, and then they like kill a town, and then
Are you telling me that the bees take over the military base?
Yep, like killing everybody in it. They're not like pressing buttons.
Okay, I was like, that bee has a gun.
There is a lot of scenes where after people get stung, they hallucinate giant bees, and I was like, I don't need this, Irwin Allen. I made the mistake too of the copy I found was the 156-minute extended cut, literally a film longer than 2001: A Space Odyssey. Michael Caine is like the expert, but he's also a badass, and like the government can't tell him what to do. He knows about the bees. I also think it's a weird point of contention that at one point he holds a press conference and this one guy's like, why do you keep calling them specifically African bees? We don't. Like, they could be Brazilian. Like, you keep referring to them as African and then talking about American honeybees. And he's like, it doesn't matter what we call them. And then continues to call them African. So it's very much like a racial thing.
It's very China virus.
Yeah, exactly. Olivia de Havilland plays the school superintendent, Maureen Schuster, in the town. And she's caught in a love triangle between retiree Felix Austin, played by Ben Johnson, and town mayor and drugstore owner Clarence Tuttle, played by Fred McMurray. And so they have this weird love triangle plot that's playing out as these killer bees are attacking their town. There's an amazing scene where she's like screaming over the microphone to get everybody inside because the killer bees are attacking. And as that's happening, there's like children dying outside. And she like runs into a classroom where all these kids are screaming, and she's like, why? And she does one of the funniest things in cinema history, which she looks out the window, sees the dead bodies, turns around to the camera, and lets out like a moan of ecstasy. It doesn't feel like she's like scared or sad. She's like, ugh.
She made a choice.
Yeah.
She said, maybe not a scream this time. Maybe a grunt, a passionate grunt.
Attention. This is Miss Schuster. Please listen very carefully. A swarm of killer bees is coming this way. I want every teacher and every student to close off whatever area you may be in at this very moment.
And I feel bad picking something so close to the end of her career, but I think, at that point, she's not really being offered the roles that she wants, and she's really just going along for the ride. And I think she mentally was like, yeah, I'm not going to bring it today. She was like that song that occasionally goes around Twitter where she's like, I don't want to do the work today. I don't really want to do the work today.
Do you know where that's from? Do you know where that's from?
I do. I'm playing dumb, but
I was like, I love that show.
And that's what it feels like. And she ends up dying maybe an hour and a half into the movie. So then I still sat around and watched the next 9 years of it. But she dies in the most ridiculous way, which is they load everybody that survived from the town onto the train.
Okay.
And they let and she's having a conversation with her two loves about her love triangle. And a bee gets into the conductor's apartment and he tries to kill it. And when he does, the bees swarm and the train falls off the track and explodes.
What?
Yes. Everybody dies in a train explosion.
I'm tired of these motherfucking bees on this motherfucking train.
I could see it being a fun, like, put it on at a bar or something, or in the background at a party, because there's just enough bees attacks that it might be entertaining. But yeah, another small anecdote, and then I will let you do your one star review. They had to hire a group of people to remove the stingers from the bees so they would be able to attack the actors. And Olivia de Havilland was one of the only people on set stung by a bee.
Wait, but don't bees die once you take the stinger out?
You can clip them. They weren't removing them. They were clipping them.
Imagine having that job, clipping bee fucking stingers for like a movie. God, kill me.
It's a living.
It's a living. Okay, my 1-star review is actually on the way opposite end of her career. I chose 1938's Four is a Crowd. Four is a Crowd is a romantic comedy. It's also directed by Michael Curtiz, who we mentioned a lot. He worked a lot with Olivia. Also starring Errol Flynn. It was their 4th collaboration together. It also stars Rosalind Russell and Patrick Knowles. I think Rosalind Russell actually is very excellent in this movie.
I love Rosalind Russell. She's so great.
Yeah, she is like just giving you like the real ooh-ah-ah sensation, shoulder, like sassy Bob the entire time. But I the movie's like ridiculous, and it's I will say they look so fucking hot. The end, like the beginning of this movie is just them walking down New York, like hand in hand, and there's like live, laugh, luffing while like the credits roll, and I'm like, okay, they look fucking hot. But okay, so Olivia plays Lori, who is the granddaughter of like this big businessman in New York. The movie centers around Errol Flynn's character, who is like a PR dude who used to work at a newspaper. The new guy who owns the newspaper fired him and is thinking of closing the paper down altogether. Shenanigans. The main reason I chose this is because this is like key classique Olivia de Havilland, just like I can see the pain and agony behind her eyes playing this dumb bitch. Like she literally is just like giving you the most silly Billy child, like, oh, I'm just a little girl and don't you love me? And it's like, and these 4 people, they all, like Errol Flynn's character gets in this like love triangle between the 2 of these women, and then there's this 4th guy also. He's like, see, isn't that bad? The plot is very loosey-goosey, like, I'm gonna put you in the papers and make news happen and money. It's really unimportant. All you have to know essentially is that Lori is this granddaughter of this big money dude, and she just is. It's like a waste of her talent, and I also just could feel. This is around the same time, the late 30s, where she is just like desperate. I mean, it's the same. It's the year before Dodge City, so she was depressed and just like having the worst time, you know.
And it just reflected on screen.
Well, if you think I'm going to stand by and see you make love to another woman, you're mistaken. If that's your idea of an engagement, huh?
But darling, don't you see it's for the happiness of both of us, my sweet?
Well, I guess it is if you look at it that way.
I guess I can trust you. You've been all right so far. I'll cooperate.
That's the girl.
And then you have her next to Rosalind, who is just giving you a little bit more, like that character is just like beefier, meatier, more interesting than just being like the ditzy, like, oh, me, don't you love me? It's very baby, sexy baby, which we famously hate.
Yeah.
Errol Flynn had tried to, you know, ask Jack Warner to like put him in non-action-y movies. And so he put him in this, and the movie was a big flop. And then in this movie, they even still make him like run around like crazy. Dogs are chasing after him. He bites a dog, like literally bites a dog. And I was like, maybe girl, just like stay in your lane. I don't know. But yeah, my pick is 1938 for as a crowd. Just not. You could tell Olivia was ready to go. She was ready to fucking bust out.
Was there anything else you saw that you didn't particularly like?
Like I mentioned, Anthony Adverse. I don't know this man. I'm so sorry. I felt like the longest movie of my life. Also, a lot of like poorly aged race things. I thought Santa Fe Trail was so bad. I was like, who cares? Santa Fe Trail, and also what's the They Die with Their Boots On? Those like war movies where it's like the Civil War was bad and hard, but why? I mean, I don't know. All these movies that I saw for this episode specifically, they're like about the South and how the North is bad, and I'm like, what the fuck? Did Hollywood have like this crazy like romance with the South and like how things used to fucking be? Yeah.
I really hated Raffles from 1939.
Oh my God.
and she even said like, this is not the type of thing I like doing, which sucks because I really like David Niven and I think he's very charming, but that movie is nothing.
Raffles, I think Raffles is the funniest named movie ever.
Oh, absolutely.
The guy's name is Raffles. Yeah, it's a very dumb movie.
I mean, pretty much anything she did at the end of her career, The Fifth Musketeer is, but once again, she's barely in it. That TV movie I mentioned, The Woman He Loved, was, I could not believe I was watching it. And 1938, she makes this movie called Hard to Get, and it is so much fun until there is blackface and tons of racism. And I was just like, no, why'd you have to do this? And like literally at one point I was like, why isn't this movie been better restored? And that's why. And yeah,
gotcha.
And big heads up for Hard to Get. And I think the last one I want to mention, and we talked about this a bit beforehand, but The Light in the Piazza. The Light in the Piazza is a movie in which she plays the mother of a girl who has had a head injury and therefore now has a disability. And
she has like developmental issues.
Yeah, she has developmental issues.
She's played as if she's a child forever in her.
It's essentially the Charlize Theron season of Arrested Development, but not played as a comedy.
Very that.
And she falls in love with George Hamilton, and essentially Olivia de Havilland's like, should I tell him or not? And she, spoiler alert, doesn't. And everything works out in the end. And I was just like, this is offensive. Like, this is not right.
It's like, see, people with developmental issues can be hot, sexy babies too.
Yeah, that's what it really felt. And I was like, whoa, oh no. And she's fine in it, but she's like kind of, I don't think she ever quite found the groove between like caring parent and just like, she almost feels like a robot at some points. Like she's like talking to her husband and he's like, you sound very upset. And she's like, I am very upset at you.
Mama, he says he's seen us before. Do you remember?
I'm
afraid I don't.
Signora, my English is not so,
Well, my Italian is not so either, but I do thank you for helping my daughter. Clara, I think it's
Signora, on Sunday I see you in the square. How'd you say, the bigger square? Piazza Repubblica. You remember? Musica,
It's a sticky movie that, I mean, you texted me beautiful gowns. Beautiful gowns.
Oh, that Technicolor, I love it. Let's get out of our 1-star reviews and into our 5-star reviews.
I think that truly that 5-6 year period at late 40s, early 50s is just like the gold mine for
it's banger
Olivia.
after banger after banger.
Yeah. And I have to go with 48's The Snake Pit. It's just so fucking good.
It's very good. Good.
She's just like in complete control of all of her, powers. And from the opening bit of the movie where she's just sitting on the bench and she's hearing voices and she's reacting to everything, and she is able to like walk the line between like oh no, I remember who I am. But then like there's confusion, like, wait, where am I and what's going on? And no, I am married, but what? And she's just, and she plays, there's such a wide array of emotions. What's crazy, what I did think when I was watching this, I was like, this is the movie that Gothica wanted to be. Oh no. Because this movie does have some like really effective visual things that go on when she says like I felt like I was in a snake pit, and like the camera just like goes up all over it. The movie is very stylish. It's frightening for sure. But she has such a warmth and really grounds the entire movie so it doesn't like fly off the rails. Yeah, I just think it's you can see the work she's putting in, and it's shocking to see this movie after seeing something like Raffles or Forza Crowd, or they literally just, I can't imagine like this woman who's doing this work, you're making do silly, and not silly's bad, but like not even silly good things, this just like wasting her talents. And I honestly, they're like we mentioned, there are all these bangers in that time period, but I think the Snake Pit is far and away demonstrates what she's totally capable of doing.
Come on, I said to lie down on this table.
How are you today, Mrs. Cunningham?
You're going to electrocute me. Was my crime so great?
No, Mrs. Cunningham, nobody's being electrocuted. Dr. Summer and I are just trying to make you well. We're your friends. All right, Miss Liz.
Would they dare to kill me without a trial? If I say I demand a lawyer, they'll have to do something. It's in the Constitution.
Now just relax, honey.
3 against 1. It isn't fair. Yes, I'd better call a lawyer right away.
I want...
Miss Davis, I want her held loosely.
I think the other thing I love about the Snake Pit is it comes in this time where she's really playing these sort of... She rarely has like this contemporary moment for herself. It comes in between To Each His Own and The Heiress and My Cousin Rachel and That Lady, which is not a good movie, but like all these period pieces or movies in which she's having to play older. And I think what's great about the Snake Pit is she's really having a chance to play somebody who is her age, who is a lot like herself, but has this other thing and play off that other element. And I don't think you end up seeing that much in her career, in all honesty.
Yeah, and I also love that. There are men in this movie, of course, and but her situation and her getting out of it is not dependent. Like, it's not like the relationship to these men is important to her. She, going into the depths of this mental institution, figures it out for herself, and she makes these relationships with other women in this institution and is able to, kind of come to terms with her mental illness. It feels like these men, like the doctor, her husband, they kind of give her the space to do that, which I really liked.
Yeah.
And yeah, this movie is on Hulu, so...
You picking that ended up solidifying my 5-star review because I was down to 2 and now I'm down to 1. And I think because you didn't pick it, I have to be the person who picks The Heiress. 1949's The Heiress. I mentioned everything about the plot earlier. William Wyler directed it. But I think what's really fascinating about this role is watching her. As you mentioned, she's doing this voice thing, and maybe that's not... I don't know if it's the smartest choice, but it works. I don't know if anybody else could have pulled it off. I guess that's what I'm saying. I think anybody, because she's being this sweet sort of naive. Yeah. And that's really what's interesting about her character. And, in To Each His Own, you do watch her get harder, but there's very much a different situation in that film. And this, it was really fascinating to watch because she's really in this terribly emotionally abusive relationship with her father. Mm-hmm. And you're really watching somebody's soul die. She thinks she falls in love with the first man she sees, and he might in fact be just an awful human as well. He might be maybe not as bad as her father, but certainly could be if the relationship progressed in a weird sort of way. And it's interesting because you get to watch her change. it's inadvertent, and so I think it's a little unfair to be like she's the cause of her father's death, but like she pushes her father mentally to a place that makes it easier for him to die.
Honestly, good. Fuck him.
Yeah, and I think that's really fascinating to watch her go from this innocent to this.
Right. I think
like corrupt isn't the right word, but that's sort of what's coming to mind.
It's like the loss of innocence.
Yeah,
because it's not like she's at the beginning of this movie, she's, naive and young or whatever, but she's also like still a beautiful girl. And just because she doesn't want to like fucking, have witty repartee with like party guests, she's just like a shy girl who like is doing normal things. She likes knitting and let her fucking knit. And they make her feel like she is less than her mother, who is dead. Because her mother was this, fucking, I don't know, network extraordinaire. Like it blows my mind. They're like, oh no, you're bad because you can't network and like have good conversations with these dudes at this fucking dance thing that she didn't want to go to in the first place. Yeah, she told them.
She has a heightened social anxiety that people didn't have the words for back then, right. and it's fascinating to watch. And it is, it is a very, I think it's a tricky performance, especially because she has to play so much of her life and change so much. Right.
Is that the song?
Yes. Will you play it for me?
I do not play.
May I? Can you hear me way over there? On my 10th visit, you might even sit here.
Mr. Townsend, you are very bold.
Between her father and this man who may or may not be telling her the truth, she's made a fool. And so she really just like kind of crusts over and like hardens up, as opposed to like in To Each His Own. She was never like, she had the affair. She had the one night stand, right. She was not innocent.
No.
She just kind of is like dealing with her own decisions. In this, it is truly like, look what you fucking did with me. Like, you know?
Yeah.
Like you did this to me.
And it all culminates, and I won't spoil it for you, but it culminates in one of my favorite endings in cinema history. And so fucking good. But yeah, I truly believe she deserved the Academy Award for that, and I'm glad she got it. And that's The Heiress.
Shout out to Aaron Copland's music in The Heiress.
So fucking good too.
So good. So good.
So was there anything else you saw that you particularly liked? Before you even jump in, my other 5-star review would have been To Each His Own, and I know you didn't love it, but like, oh my god, when I say I cried, by the way, and if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, I'm an easy mark when it comes to emotions, but it gets to the end of that movie, and I was like, she's his mom. Yeah, so like, trust me, if you're in the mood for a classical tearjerker, it's there.
I really liked Strawberry Blonde.
I like Strawberry Blonde a lot.
It's too. It's a fun, again, like if you're gonna make a silly movie, like give her something to do, make it fun. And Strawberry Blonde really felt like that to me. Gone with the Wind is a movie that exists that people love.
I feel like it'd be hard for us to not say it's Gone with the Wind in her 5-star reviews, but also she
is very good.
I agree with everything you're saying.
She is very good, but it is a racist movie, and but also it is a spectacular, like looking at it is like kind of stunning. I will say also that
I just keep trying to impress this on people too. When you say it's a racist movie, it was also an incredibly liberal movie for its time period, and just to show you how some things have changed, and not everything obviously is for the better, and not everything is fixed. But I do think it does say something that Gone with the Wind is from a liberal perspective. Right.
And you see that in the movie when it's like you don't see any treatment of slaves like poorly, like, and we get Butterfly McQueen, who I love, and it's. So yes, but looking at it now is very jarring.
Yeah.
And I will say to HBO Max's, I don't know, giving them some props. They do a very nice, warmer startup thing. When you press play, one of their black executives comes out and says, "Hey guys, this movie is complicated," and it's not just like a little like card. She talks about the historical context of the movie, which I really appreciated, and I thought it was handled really well. And like I literally started this movie at like 9 o'clock one night. And
I know. Dan turned to me and was like, "Louis starting this at 9 o'clock." So yeah,
I went to bed at 1. But she is very good. All that to say, Olivia de Havilland is very good in this movie. But it is a ride and a half.
I really love The Great Garrick, but I'm a huge mark for James Whale anyways, as it is. The Adventures of Robin Hood, I do think is maybe the highlight of the whole Errol Flynn, Olivia de Havilland thing. I think they have so much chemistry, and they don't even have that many scenes together, but when they really spark in that movie, they really spark. And also, I just mentioned Dan, shout out to Dan Walber, who has a weekly production design column over at the Film Experience. He did an entire write-up of the production design of The Adventures of Robin Hood, and I think it's worth your time.
Yeah, that movie, I mean, that movie is made for that type of analysis because it is gorgeous.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that wraps up our reviews. Why don't we get into the fast forward?
Fast forward to today. Ryan Murphy's still alive.
Yeah, Olivia de Havilland dead. So apparently the curse did not work.
Damn it.
She was supposed to live for another 10 years. But yeah, it's hard to do a fast forward. We've run into this a couple times. I mentioned Cary Grant, our Vincent Price episode, our Joan Crawford episode. It's hard to be like, moving forward, what do we want from this actor? But I think what's great is I think she made her mark both as a performer and setting a legal precedent that is still enforced to this day. And I think that's really fascinating and says a lot about her and who she was. And I don't know, I'm just very happy that we got her for as long as we did, even if she wasn't doing as much work, even if she was just kind of living as a Hollywood luminary.
The scene of her walking out at the 75th Oscars and everyone standing up, and she's in that like gorgeous blue thing. She has like big white hair. I mean, it's just like, we don't have a lot of those moments anymore, I don't think.
Yeah.
And
because it really feels like she's royalty.
Yeah.
And part of that is manufactured mystique on her part. Part of that is she lived so long, but 90% of it is that she worked hard and she was talented. And those things really paid off. I feel bad because it feels superficial to say this. It doesn't hurt that she was gorgeous.
Yeah.
And she was gorgeous from moment A to the end of her life. She was a beautiful older woman.
She was a 5'2" when I Dance with You, tiny little firecracker of a woman. And what I think, speaking of like impression, it's just like to know oneself that well. I've always said this, like, I think it's always just like, oh my God, I still don't know who I am. I don't know who Gavin is. She was 18 years old when she burst onto the scene and very quickly realized, like, I'm better than this, I'm more than this, and I want to do more, and I can do more. And she proved over and over again she could. Like, literally, she had the receipts, like the Oscar receipts, and was like, this is not working, and I can't keep doing this. I either need to change the situation or I need to go. And bitch, she did both. She changed it, and then she left. And if... we said she incurred so many legal fees. Back in the day, that was a lot of fucking money. And she was not like the #1 box office star. Right. Anyone else could have done this. A man should have done this. When she shows up to the Oscars, the 75th Oscars, and people stand up, it's because she changed the way Hollywood worked. And it wasn't, like a wave of people. It wasn't her and other people. It was just her. She paid for it, and not only in money, but in time lost, she, but God bless her, like, she made it work, and she also reaped the benefits. After that, she, brought the people that she wanted to work with to make To Each His Own. She did the work to make, the Snake Pit and The Heiress. For The Heiress, didn't she say she had seen a production
she saw
of
the
it?
play.
Yeah, and said, someone get the rights, get the air rights.
Yep. and that's really what it is. And she, prophecy come true. she did put in the work and she got rewarded for it. She was a success because she put in the hard work.
Right, and not only was she a success, but she said she got what she wanted, which was respect.
Respect, exactly.
And so she got both. She stands out from, I think, to me, like the other Golden Age, and to be fair to other Golden Age actresses, I'm not the fucking expert, but to me, and you know, from Joan to her, in these 2 episodes we've done, you know, I think Joan probably was like the sassier girl who had a little more like fire, but Olivia was able to do those roles, but also really made a difference in this community and in this profession that she loved. And that's the difference. And I think that's why people really hold her in such high esteem. It's just, you don't come along every day where someone literally changes the entire industry that you work in.
Absolutely.
And certainly not something like Hollywood, which is, you know, fucking famously a garbage place to work.
But it's good because we're going right back to the studio system. So, hey. Yay.
Oh my God, you're right. Right.
Yeah. It's okay. It's okay. I don't want to end on that note. I want to say you're correct. Everything that you just said, Olivia de Havilland, amazing. Thank you for doing everything you did.
Yeah, and God, I wonder if we will get any more like her. You know?
Yeah. She is truly one of a kind. So sorry, Joan Fontaine.
Not Joan Fontaine.
Whoops.
Or so we're doing her episode next, or.
But I think that wraps up Olivia de Havilland. Thank you so much for listening to us this week. If you want to find us online, there are a myriad of ways of finding us. If you want to find us on Twitter, you can find us at The Mixed Reviews.
We're also on Facebook. Just type in The Mixed Reviews.
You can email us at reviewsmixed@gmail.com.
We're also on Instagram at _mixed_reviews.
And you can listen to us just like you have been doing on several podcast apps, all the major ones. We got Apple Podcasts, we got Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play Music, Amazon. And if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and review, a nice little 5-star rating, and write a little nice words about us, and we'll read it on air.
Yes, we love that. Again, shout out to Susan and Ireland. Thank you guys for listening. We appreciate you guys. Wear your masks.
Wash your hands.
Fight the power.
Donate.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Since you've gone away, guess I'm just a lazy
Ritzy,
Ritza, Ritzy, redondo.
When my dream boat comes home.